Hi everyone, how you going? So I just thought I'd come on and see who's about and come online and do a couple of little updates and a little bit of a chat since we last online and I was rudely interrupted by a troll. Anyway, so I'll give it a couple of seconds and see who's around. And there's my Facebook notification telling me that I'm online. Bingo. Don't you just love it? Facebook tells you you're online. Anyway, so I just thought we'd have a bit of a chat about a couple of things this week, right? One thing I want to make clear, this page is not an ALP page, nor is it a Greens page, okay? We sit in the middle and we're not political, right? It's difficult sitting in between the two parties. And when I first started this fight up in Hervey Bay, and we were doing public meetings, I said to both the local ALP and the Greens, this is about community, not about your politics, right? I remember saying to this is about not you guys, right? This is about us, all of us, and standing up together to fight this card. Now, we had great support from our state Labor, right? And it was a fight back then to get the federal caucus to understand what the card was fully about. Because at that stage, yes, they were supporting the trials in Ceduna and Kununurra, but they were going based on the LNP's information, not the people's information. Over the past 3 years, right, we've changed that as a community, and with your support out there, right, and be able to get the card holders' voices heard and be able to get past the LNP rubbish, right? Federal ALP caucus changed its position in 2017 to voluntary with informed consent. And about 5 weeks ago, Federal ALP caucus took a vote to stand against the cashless debit card. They still support income management on a voluntary level, as in the basics card, with full informed consent. Not this privatised sell-off to a private company of people, right? And they stood up this last fight and really fought against the card. As I said, we are not ALP, we are not Greens. We're in the middle, we're non-political, and none of us belong to parties. Right? For 3 or 4 years, I've had people go, oh, you're ALP, and no. You're Greens, no. But no one can deny the fact that Senator Rachel Seward has fought her butt off for 13 years to stop income management. She stood with us along the way. We've gone and stood with her. ALP State Labor, where I am, have fought against it, right, where they could. And ALP generally stand up against it with us. We only know of 2 supporting federal members, senators that support it, and they abstained this time round, and LNP gave them pairs. So 2 of their members stood down too. So the votes were fair and equitable, except for Centre Alliance stabbing everybody in the back. All right. So, and going against their own policy of, oh, we'll wait for the evaluation that was legislated by Tim when, you know, in order to get the trial into Hinkler, that evaluation had to be up front before Centre Alliance would vote for it again, and they've not done that. They've broken that as well. So this was not a lose for us, and it wasn't a win for them because they cheated. That's the bottom line, okay? They cheated. So along the way, there's been small victories. It's a big feat to change the mind of a federal caucus party. And you had to do it with evidence, and you had to do it with conviction, and you had to keep going and going and going and going. And we've all done it. You guys out there, we've all done it, right? It's not an easy feat to do that, but it's done. And federal Labor are against the card. Now, somebody asked about their plans for the future. I can't speak for federal Labor. I'm not even a Labor member. But when I spoke to Bill Shorten last time he came up to Bundaberg, and this is in the media, you can find video evidence of this, right? At the time, this was just as the start of the rollout of the cashless debit card was coming into Hinkler before the previous federal election, right? He said they would try and roll it back, but they haven't got any access to the contracts and this and that and all the other, right? We don't know what they will do if they get in. All we know is that another term of LNP and we're done. Everybody will be on it the way they're going. Do you know what I mean? Because they'll cheat their way in. They'll cheat their way to do it, like they've done this time to keep it going. It's on a thread. They did it dishonestly. They cheated. You know. So so that's the ALP Greens matter out the way. If you want to find out what their policy is going forward, then write to them. By all means, ring them. Right? Ring ring Linda Burney's office. She's the Federal Minister for Social Services for the Federal ALP. You know what I mean? And ask them what their policy is moving forward regarding the cashless debit card and what they will be doing if they win the next election. You have to ask them, right? You know, yeah, it's not wanted by them, and their state counterparts here. It's not wanted here by their state counterparts either. You know what I mean? It's not. They don't want this for people. So anyway, I'm going to go through a couple of other things. So our little smiley face laughing troll is back. I set up a new page yesterday, I noticed. Funnily, he's blocked me already, so I can't even see that page. But I don't care, because we don't care about the laughing face trolls. Ignore it, right? If you feel like you want to go and report the page, by all means do, but don't give him any oxygen. Don't type on his page. Don't fight with him. Do not give him any oxygen, okay? He's an attention-seeking little whatever. Obviously has nothing better to do with his time than laugh at every comment. He's probably not even reading the comments. He's just going click, 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 just to wind people up. Don't let him wind you up. Don't let him in your head, right? Report the page if you want. It'll close down again in a few days' time. He'll open another one next week. He had 3 going last week. You know what I mean? We haven't got time, right? Our focus here is supporting the card holders, right? Amplifying their voices, sharing their stories with you guys out there so that we can build a movement to stop the card. That's our focus. The people, right? The people that are trapped on this thing, that's our focus. Getting it stopped, that's our focus, right? So we're going to take a bit of spell. All of our admins will step down at some point over the next few weeks, because everybody needs a break. We'll all be around somewhere, but not in the capacity that we have been at the moment. It's been full on, and many, many hours are here all the time. And it's not just me, okay? It's not just me. I can't do the writing as well as others do. You have to give the nod to Amanda. She does a hell of a lot of work, right, with the legislation and the writing and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Saw Pause Media for our Christmas video, or our end of year video, which has got everything in it for this year, and wraps up everything. Do you know what I mean? For this year. So I did an interview for Bundaberg Today article, which I'm going to go and dig up for you, and I'm going to go through it. Now, Murdoch's closed all of our local papers. Remember, he went around and he bought them all, and now they're all subscription, right? In our local region, all the paper, as in solid items, do you know what I mean, have gone. So that left our communities up here, Bundaberg, Hervey Bay and Maryborough, with no newspapers. People like newspaper in the morning, even if Murdoch crap. I wouldn't buy Murdoch in a million years, but you know, so we've got independents now have stepped up doing like weekly or fortnightly papers, and that's really good, you know. So I got a call from this guy from the Bundaberg Today, and he I did this interview for him, and then I asked him about his independence, so to speak, and whether it would be edited. And he didn't actually edit a lot out. I mean, remember, they do always edit stuff because they've got space restrictions for other things, right? So that's fair, that's right. But he didn't change my words, which was lovely. It was lovely. So, going through that article, Keith Pitt, I'm going to pull him up here, because some of the things he said, people need to be aware of too. You know what I mean? So, I was able to get out the fact that, you know, that people's consumer protections and their legal protections and human rights, you know, were a big issue. And I was able to get the message across. But Keith Pitt's comments, you know, he doesn't seem to understand. He seems to think that the card played a part in putting more food on the table throughout COVID and paying more bills and paying more rent. Well, the fact that Social Security payments were raised to what they should have been in the first place, if they had not been frozen in 1996, actually gave people for 6 months a fighting chance to eat. Nothing to do with the card. It was the fact that they had the money to actually go and buy fruit and vegetables and have meals every day. Made a big difference. It gave people the ability to go to specialist appointments that they'd been putting off because they couldn't afford it, to fix cars, to get cars registered, to buy their kids computers, to buy new clothes instead of secondhand. You know what I mean? All those sort of things. And it boosted the economy for that 6 months. But of course he's trying to say the card did that. No. When you put people, when you give them a livable standard of living, you know, livable income, that's the impact you're going to get. You know, but he even admitted himself that what the money was spent on, right? We kept hearing in Parliament, you know, about the whinging that from certain Ceduna MP Ramsey, you know, because people got extra percentage of cash, they were spending it on grog and blah, 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 right? Keith Pitt made it very clear in this article what money was spent on. And it just proves that there was no excess spending on alcohol and drugs and stuff like that, because people used the opportunity to get the most out of their money that they could, especially their cash portion being raised, meant that they also had access to being able to buy stuff on Facebook, buy, sell and swap, and buy some other things as well, which they normally have to fight around getting permission and doing affidavits and handing over someone else's private details, and you know, and just basically they've all given up trying, and they don't, and people won't wait the 4 days for the approval. Bottom line. You know, he just doesn't seem to have a clue. So he says here, COVID has clearly had a big impact on our community. However, during the pandemic, more welfare has been spent on groceries, homewares, footwear, clothing and furniture. You know what I mean? Yeah, precisely. Because people had the money to spend. Nothing to do with the card, right? Except for when the card stuffed up on their rents and stuff like that. But even then, a lot of people had enough money, right, in reserve to even topple those problems a little bit without it causing, I mean, still call this stress, but they were able to fudge it better so that they could get through whatever hassles indue through them in the meantime. Right? Another warning that is actually put out, right? People in the trial sites who have started receiving eligible welfare payments during the COVID crisis will be placed on the card once the government lifts a pandemic pause on new entrants. So anybody who lost their jobs in the card regions that has not been put on a cashless debit card at this time, right? As soon as they lift that pandemic pause, which would probably be around about March, I would say, because that's when the last of the COVID supplements will be cut off for people on Social Security, reducing them back to $40 a day. I mean, at the moment, come New Year's Day, they're back to $50 a day, which is still not enough to live on, right? And people are starting to put up what their budget's going to be like for their food, and people like Jody will go back to a $4 a day food budget, which is not going to do our economy any good. It's not going to help create any more jobs. It's going to actually push a lot of the biggest businesses after Christmas that have been clinging on. It'll push them off a cliff. All right, simple as that. It'll be the end for a lot of businesses, and Retail Association and all the economists have been warning the government, don't do this. You know, even just before Christmas, you're going to put another 400,000 people out of work, could see another 1 million people out of work after next year. They don't care. But as soon as they take that pandemic pause off in the regions, anybody who's on Social Security payment, parenting payments, anything, and in the 3 first regions, the under 67 DSP and carers as well will be copying it. Do you know what I mean? Up here it'll be anybody on job seeker under 36. Under 36. They keep saying 35. Well, we've got plenty of 35-year-olds still on the card waiting to age out, because they don't age out until 36. So we'll just clear that up, because I'm sick of the media. They just won't listen. I correct them when I do my interviews, and they still print 35 and under, and it's like, no, because then I get people coming to me going, oh, I was supposed to get off at 35 and they're not letting me off until I'm 36. Well, that's it. It's 36 and under. Misleading the public again all the time. You know what I mean? So I thought I'd just talk about those sort of things. And, yeah. So we've done our end of year video. Saw Pause Media did that. Thank you very much. Worked very, very hard on that. Be sure to go and have a look at it. It's up on the page now, and share it widely and watch it to the end, to the very end. Yeah, yeah, well, that's all I can say at the moment. So I've got a couple of updates. So Tempest has finally been granted permission to pay rent at her mum's place. How kind. They wouldn't let her pay rent at her dad's place, and she ended up homeless, didn't she? So looking back at Tempest's story, she was refused an opt-out because too many declines originally, and a risk of being homeless. At the time, she was not homeless, but they wouldn't let her pay rent, but her dad and her had an agreement, okay? And she was safe and stable where she was. So they punished her because they ran her into debt with daycare fees. She scraped up the money, got it back paid, and she got it into credit. Then she put in for an appeal. She was knocked back on the grounds that she wasn't homeless this time, right? But she actually was in real life, but they're saying that she wasn't. So that was all safe, the homeless side, but it was too many declines. And it's like, this is ridiculous, right? They just made her homeless. So now they've swung around the other way. They won't let her do a third appeal. She's now got to do a whole new exit application. And she's had to fight with them for the last couple of weeks. And they finally agreed to allow her to transfer money to her mum towards rent. So I'm just waiting for the third opt-out to be a knockback. And it'll say she's at risk of homelessness. You know what I mean? Because she's in shared accommodation. And that's the standard to go-to line. And they'll probably still say her declines. Even though the last one, they suggested that she had debt collectors, and she's never had debt collectors' debts, so it'll be interesting how she fights this one. She's off to welfare rights organisations anyway in WA, and we'll support her all the way on that, because they have just dicked her around. So Mahalia went on to Gwyn 7 News, remember a couple of weeks ago, but just the day of the vote, I think it was, Mahalia was able to send us the videos of Mahalia fled domestic violence in Hervey Bay. She used her cash advance that you get from your centrelink, that is an advance on your own money, that Bob Hawke set up originally to help people with no stigma and not to be used against anybody, you know what I mean? And originally it was designed that for people that are on social security didn't have enough money to have a bulk amount of money, so they used to be able to borrow $1,000, and then when they paid it back, they could get it again the next day. Johnny Howard made sure that people on job seeker and family payments could only access $500 once a year. Once they got in, they changed it. But the idea was to enable somebody to be able to buy a cheap $500 bomb, as he put it, because back then you could, right? You can't look for a job if you haven't got a car. You can't look for a job if you can't afford to get a license. You know, he saw the practicalities in that, and living on such low incomes, they couldn't afford to do those things. So, you know, it gave people a bit of a boost to be able to pay up some bills or buy some new things or fix a car, buy a car. And it was a service that it was to help you, but without penalising you. So the LNP government are trying to turn it into something negative and penalise you for using your advances. Right, so because that's the latest one, is you've used your cash advance, right? This was the reason that Mahalia was knocked back for her opt-out when she moved to WA, was that she'd had to use her cash advance for the airfare to get to WA and to be able to buy a second-hand car. Now, she moved into a house, an empty house. I did a meme about this 5 years ago, where women fleeing, getting housing, whether it be emergency housing, and they're walking through the front door of their housing and they've got nothing. And she walked into that situation of not being able to access any cash because it's all tied up on the card, and the hard slog of trying to rebuild a home without the access to Facebook buy, sell and swap, without the access to be able to jump online and there's a fridge for $50 and there's a lounge for $50 and there's a bed and this, that, you know what I mean? Without that, because of the sheer amount of paperwork and ludicrousy that you've got to go through with the condescending staff on the other end who'll tell you whether you can afford it or not. And, you know, the embarrassment and humiliation you've got to go through with the seller and getting them to sign an affidavit and take a photo of the goods and all the rest of the rubbish that they put people through. So Mahalia found that living in the town that she was living in, she couldn't buy food at the IGA, and because it sold alcohol. She couldn't get anything at the post office. She couldn't go to the pub for a counter meal because it's a banned merchant. And then she got a friend to take her somewhere and they stopped at the service station and she couldn't pay for the fuel. So she was locked in this town and then having to rely on travelling to another town to do shopping and stuff like that. And it's just a nightmare. So she discovered over the last few months and talking to the shop owner that her card worked in the alcohol FPOS to buy alcohol, but it declined bread and milk. And she sent us those videos. Well, Gwyn7 went out there and interviewed her, and we've put that on our page. And yeah, they filmed it doing exactly that. Of course, the department was not impressed, and all the technological problems, but it's bigger than its the technical problems, because it's forced this young mum who's, you know, to have to travel to another town to do her shopping, and she doesn't have a car at the moment, right? So there's things going on, and the pressure, it's just, the pressure that people are put under. Well, I saw a comment on another page, why do people commit suicide? Because taking away their ability to manage their own lives, make their own decisions, right, interfering in what is your autonomy, and then putting extra financial stress, stigma, humiliation on top of whatever situations they're in. Some people, it pushes them over the edge, and most people, it stresses them out so much they end up on going on medication. It impacts families. It impacts mostly women and children, right? And we don't hear a lot from the guys that are on the card. A friend of mine ran into somebody in South Australia. I mean, the card's not in where she was, but she tried to approach this guy to talk to him, and he was so shamed he shoved it in his wallet and ran away. And this was in a totally different place, not in a card zone, right? We find that men don't want to speak about it. I've had a couple that have spoken to me discreetly, and They just don't deal with it. They're not coping with it, you know, and you can't. So, I am reading the comments as people are commenting. I just, on my phone, it just gets a bit tiny, you know what I mean? So bear with me. And of course it makes it wobble when I touch it. As I said, yeah, we'll see where it goes with Mahalia. We'll keep in touch. I try and follow up as much as possible with people, and along the way we get to know them. If you're on the card and you've got issues and problems, don't ever be afraid to approach. All right. Don't be afraid to stand up and speak out, because without your stories, the senators that stood up last week could not have stood up and told them what it's like. Do you know what I mean? And so everybody needs to not be shy. Now, this Bundaberg Today has a Facebook page, and I'm going to go to it. Just bear with me for a second. Hang on. Because in the comments, somebody did put out their story, and you'd be horrified with what, you know, what, I'm just looking, we're going. Oh, hang on, we're going. Where's he gone? I've got to find it, sorry. Because I'm on their Facebook page right now. And it's caught me off guard. Here we are. Okay. So it's got quite a few comments on it. And there was a comment that came in from a lady who, when she was put on it, she was pregnant. And she asked the department, I'll read her story. So her family and herself moved back to Bundaberg to be closer to family who were unable to travel. We had no idea Bundaberg had been approved to start the CDC trial at the start of the following year, so she moved up in 2018. When I received my letter giving me 2 weeks' notice of my transition to the card, I was 35 weeks pregnant with gestational diabetes, something I'd never had previously, with midwives talking about inducing me at 37 weeks, and my firstborn in prep. There was a lot going on. I had even been flagged as high risk for postnatal depression. I called Centrelink to plead my case to have my transition delayed. I didn't know how I would cope. The first person said there was nothing they could do. The second person said they agreed with me and put me through to be evaluated. The evaluator said that I was beginning to sound ridiculous, that I wouldn't be setting it up from a hospital bed. I wouldn't get depression. It wouldn't impact my life, and I didn't need PayPal and other things. I was even told they would rather I call to get off the card if I developed postnatal depression than stop me going onto it and preventing it to begin with. Right? I've received the card in the mail the following Wednesday, but being a busy day, I was going to set it up the following day. That was until I woke up at 2 a.m. with my mortars breaking at 36 weeks, 4 days, and I was now in premature labour. Another first. I was terrified for my child, worried about how I was going to do my food shopping Friday, completely unprepared. Friday came and I was still in hospital, my preemie baby struggling to feed, my supply drying up. That's never happened before. I told my midwife about my situation. My pay had been put onto the CDC when I'd never actually activated it. I had no money for rent, not nearly enough for my bills and food. After a social worker came to see me and called Centrelink, we were put through to Services Australia, back to Indue and back to Services Australia. By the time we got through to someone who was going to help me, I'd had 2 midwives trying to help me get my baby to feed, a doctor trying to explain all the risks to my baby had and how to care for her while the social worker was on the phone asking me questions about my rental situation and my full name, etc., to set up my account and the rental limit just so I can pay rent and feed my family. Only to find out I couldn't use Woolworths Online. I'm going to stop there for a second. Woolworths Online is a banned merchant. However, For COVID, they have made a special exception, and at the moment, Woolworths Online is allowed. But it is a banned merchant, okay? So Coles holds the monopoly on the online shopping in normal circumstances, non-pandemic. So, but she couldn't use her online Woolies to buy her family food. I transferred money across to my normal account. It took over 2 days and it was just gone. I had to borrow money just to feed my 2 children at home. I wish I could tell you that it was the end of my drama, but sadly not. My rent bounced back because the rent trust wouldn't accept payments from indue. The real estate didn't have BPay, and I had to set up CentrelPay like I was a child who couldn't even pay their own bills. I was a week behind in rent that I had to spend the next month using every cent of cash I had just to pay them back. I moved, the real estate had BPay. I made sure of it just to be able to pay my rent normally again and regain some control. 3 months into a 12-month contract and the house was up for sale. 3 months dealing with walkthroughs and buyers, but the real headache started when the house sold. They wanted to go private. They thought they had CentrelPay but didn't, and I rang Centrelink to set up CentrelPay, was told that they need to do it. And they rang and I was told that I needed to do it. I rang, I was told I wasn't able to. So it's all mucking around all the time, you know what I mean? Services Australia, they wanted proof, and I had to ring and the real estate and the owner to prove my rent exchanged hands just so that she could pay her rent for a month. CentrelPay still wasn't set up, and I had to ring again, and they gave me 2 weeks to get a rent certificate from the new owner to be able to continue paying my rent. Each phone call was an hour on hold, often resulting in transfer and more waiting. I'm not proud to admit it, but I cried. It's not their fault I can't pay my rent. They are just doing their job. But this whole situation was putting my family's home at risk. I was stressed and nervous. Finally, I was approved to be able to pay my rent through transfer, but they paid it a day late. That's fine until a month later when I couldn't pay my rent. Another phone call, more waiting to be told that I can't pay my rent until tomorrow. The 28-day cycle rubbish again. Alright, so I've been basically forced into using it. She's finally got the CentrelPay set up and she's been forced into using it, or else she has to go through that ordeal every 6 months or more just to pay her rent, because every 6 months you've got to do this rent reset. But a lot of people find they have to do it every couple of months. Some people are doing it every fortnight. She applied to exit the card. She doesn't drink, gamble or do drugs, and she even quit smoking the year before. She had her firstborn. Had to fill out the paperwork, had to get the bank statements, credit card statements, school attendance records, and I had to fill it out all over again because I didn't use full capital letters in the paperwork. 3 months on and they want more statements. They ring me and start asking me how I budget it, if I use Afterpay, why do I need a credit card, how does my other half contribute. Finally, I get a response almost another 3 months later, that's 9 months. Rejected, incapable of managing my finances because my credit card that they wouldn't let her pay at the time was overdrawn. I shouldn't even have one, too bad I use it for car repairs, emergencies and so on, So they're going, oh, she shouldn't be having a credit card. Well, people have lives, but, This card has made everyday responsibility harder. Used endless amounts of my time, put me in horrible situations, completely upended my finances, all to stop me from doing things I don't even do. Now I can't use Crisco, yet Crisco was supposed to be approved. So I don't know what's going on there, because there was big fights early in the piece, it couldn't be, you couldn't use Crisco, and then you can. Hang on a second. Oh, sorry guys. Oh dear, I've just pressed the wrong buttons. Anyway, so, yeah, so she can't buy gift cards. I can't protect my details with PayPal. It's pointless going to the Sunday markets. I can't pay out my credit card when I need lump sum payments. I can't buy things off Facebook, eBay or Gumtree. Nothing big anyway. I can't take the kids to events that mainly use cash, like the show or fairs or school events. And that's not even going into the social aspect of the card and how I feel using it in public. How embarrassing is it when it's rejected, and how frustrating is it when their system is down or EFTPOS machine isn't working. She's, you know, so she's, sorry, her last comments here was, sorry for the long read, but this is cruel and expensive waste of taxpayer money and only increases the social situations that encourages the very behaviour it's supposed to prevent. Please don't inflict this on anyone else. Please end the suffering of everyone on it. They took my details without my permission and opened an account in my name without my consent, and have removed my choices, where I bank, how I shop, and how I pay my rent. It even affects how I gift to family and spend time with my children. I was never assessed for the necessity of the program, and I'm not an addict, drunk, or gambler, but I'm on this card. You know, that bottom statement says it all. They took her details without her permission and opened a bank account in her name without her consent. All right, that's, and I think people need to remember that. So, anyway, I'm going to leave you. I'll probably come back before Christmas anyway and talk to people. Have a good day. Ignore the trolls, and we'll do the best we can to moderate. Stay safe, and no fighting on the page, guys. And we'll talk to you a bit later. Have a good day. See ya.